Hello, welcome Jackie Abhulimen. You're currently based in New York, but you're from Athens or have been living in Athens. Fayo and I, we're right now in Essen in Germany. And we welcome you very much to this conversation on social movements and collective memory, which is part of a conversation series called Walgahi. Walgahi means...
Yeah, Walgahi is a word in Afaan Oromo, which is a language from the ethnic group Oromo in Eastern Africa, and it can be loosely translated into coming together or having a meeting. So we thought it would be a very good term kind of for this series where we talk to different cultural producers and practitioners in Europe and beyond.
And so basically how this whole series came about was because so it's Fayo, Said, Printala Bija, our colleague who's not here today, and we have all been working on the topics of archiving or the topic of archiving in different ways. So Printala and we were doing a research residency on a Black German woman who survived the Holocaust and who was an activist in Germany. And it was really a lot about, okay, who is archiving from what perspective and for whom is an archive? And then Fayo.
Yeah, I was working on my project called Oromia Records, where I try to archive Oromo music, and simultaneously, while they were working on their archiving questions, kind of similar or different questions about archiving, surrounding archiving came up for me. Also, yeah, who is the archive for, who builds an archive, and who gets to build an archive. So kind of these questions came naturally about, and we started, Princella, Marnie, and we all started to kind of have these conversations, and this whole Walgahi project naturally came out of this, where we're not really trying to look for solutions regarding archiving, but more kind of to exchange with other people who work surrounding topics of archiving, and try to learn from each other. Yeah.
And so I think the reason why we invited you is because, yeah, first of all, your work is very inspiring. Your work is very inspiring, and I saw, you knew Jackie already, but I saw also the YouTube video that we're also going to speak about later. And so we were just very curious about, yeah, your trajectory and like the work that you do, like the self-organizing, but also kind of the social movement that you're a part of, and how also that contributes also to a collective memory, and what are also the kind of references of collective memory that inform your work. So that's kind of like why we thought, oh, it might be super interesting to speak to you. And yeah, perhaps you could introduce yourself and talk a bit about your work, loosely, like what you're interested in and what you have been doing so far.
First of all, so to both of you, thank you so much for inviting me. I woke up today so excited to and come and talk to you both. I think it's so important, the work that you're doing, what you're building, and the fact that we're connecting and speaking to each other. These are the kind of things I live for. So thank you. I'm born and raised in Athens, Greece. The majority of my work has been social justice work, spanning over a decade, actually, focused on immigration reform in Greece. So just dismantling the plethora of inequities that shape the migrant experience in Greece, with a central focus on the rights of the second generation. So that is the children of migrants. So the people born like me, born and raised in Greece, from migrant backgrounds. And this work has, it started out as, grassroots activism, a group of us getting together and organizing. And it's evolved into advocacy work within NGOs. And also now it's kind of where, with the NGOs, it was very political, very thinking about policy work. getting laws passed, changing certain situations. So very political and social. And then now it's expanding into cultural programming. And I mean, that's where you, Marnie, kind of found out about some of the stuff I do. So, and in the cultural programming, it's my work is just focused on facilitating space towards documenting the lived experience of Black people in Greece. Yeah, and yeah, right now I'm based in New York. Actually, I'm in New York doing an MA at NYU. So yes, that's just a bit. Oh, I got a BA in England, so it's just kind of all over.
Nice, thank you, Jackie. I think, yeah, when I first met you also in Athens, it was very clear that your work was very political, because you worked at Generation 2.0, right? And also from like the research that we've done, we can see you did a lot of grassroots activism, organizing for this so-called second generation. And what we are kind of interested in is like, what does this what does this work kind of entail, right? Like very practically, what kind of rights were you fighting for the second generation? And also you kind of touched upon it already, saying how you are also part of the second generation, but maybe you can tell us also more about what inspired you, other than you also being part of this and you living this experience.
So sure, this work started from a need. It's based on lived experience. It's based on growing up in Greece and not having access to proper documentation in terms of the documentation system in place, and not having access to Greek citizenship. So to put it in context, maybe to give you a bit of a history of the situation and what started the organizing and the social movement, actually, because it was a movement at the time. So I'm talking like circa before 2009. Let's put it there, because there's no like start point. There are points that we can kind of say, we can pinpoint different points, but let's say pre 2009, there was a legislative gap, not even gap, a hole. Like there was nothing in the citizenship and immigration codes which acknowledge the fact that there are people residing in Greece who are not Greek citizens and are giving birth to children in the country. So there was no access to neither a legislative framework that acknowledged, because as an immigrant, you're either documented or undocumented. And if you're documented, it's for very specific reasons. That has to do with labor, it has to do with school, like very specific categories. There was nothing for the children of immigrants in the country, nothing like this. Like we just didn't exist, basically. Legislatively, and neither really socially. Like there was no acknowledgement, that there's a whole generation of people who are not Greek in the sense of being Greek citizens at that time, yet who are born and raised in this country. So what did we do? I mean, the movement for the second generation, it can be seen in waves. There was a wave which started with our mothers. So migrant women are some of the most organized, like on it. They're the ones who start everything. Let's start there. They start the organizing. I'm talking across the spectrum, like not just African women, migrant period, like a lot of Southeast Asian women as well, like Filipino women, quite a lot of African women. So they started the organizing around, we've given birth in this country, give our children rights, and then that entered a second phase where we, the children, now came of age and were able to start demanding for ourselves and positioning ourselves and using a language that our parents didn't have access to. in terms of how they organized. You know, when you are, it's different. It's different what you claim when you are born and raised and have come up through the system, and it's different what you claim when you are, you know, a migrant in the country. So once we started coming of age and realizing the kind of societal position that we find ourselves in, which is basically undocumented, and that, you know, as you know, that leads to a plethora of other problems in life, other kind of social exclusions in life. We started organizing. We kind of took what our mother started and kind of went with it and started organizing. Um, and I'm talking like really grassroots stuff, like getting together in houses, trying to understand what's going on. Because the thing is at the time, you don't necessarily know what you need, but you know what you want. So we knew that I mean, no, the way that doesn't sound right. You don't necessarily like know how to get there. You just know what the end goal is. Like we know that we need to be documented. You know, the claim was for citizenship, Greek citizenship. We deserve to be Greek citizens. Not we deserve, we are Greek citizens, period. So we didn't necessarily at the time know how to get there, like what that actually means. Because you can start from a wider thing, but you don't actually know what that, like we didn't know at that time that that means that we need, you know, a reform of the citizenship code. Like we didn't know. We just started getting together and just like the first step is to get together and discuss your problem. What is our problem? How many are we? You know, and yeah, and that was around 2006, 2006 is when the the elders of the second, because like that was like waves, you know, like this you know, there's my generation of second generation, there's the previous, and then there's the other ones, the after ones. And so the elders would, you know, started that whole kind of coming together because they were older. And then we kind of also, actually maybe it would be helpful to give you like a brief history of the immigration influx in Greece, so that it would since at least the 20th century, like let's put it somewhere, just so you can understand how we got here, how we found ourselves in this situation.
Yeah.
That would probably help, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, speaking like strictly in terms of movement of people into Greece, and like if you want to, you know, for the sake of starting somewhere, let's start in the 1900s. You know, first, because you know, movement of people, it's like people like to think about immigration in terms of what's going on now, but you know, people have been moving around for centuries. Like let's not get it twisted. So if we're gonna start, like let's start from the 20th century. You have like the Balkans coming into the country from the Balkan Wars in the early 1900s. Then we have the Asia Minor population exchange in the I think was it 1920s or something like that. I'm not a historian, you know, this is all things that I just kind of know from doing the work. So like, you know, please, you know, don't quote me on these things. But, you know, so you have those kind of population shifts. Then you have all of the geopolitical stuff going on in the East, you know, in Eastern Europe in the 90s. That created another wave of people. And actually, in more contemporary stuff like history, if you were to think that, I think the geopolitical changes in Eastern Europe in the 90s is where you saw a very dramatic and quite sudden movement of people into the country. And all of that going on, and what followed that was countries, because this is not necessarily just a Greek thing, but I mean, I'm going to talk about it from the experience of Greece, we're not necessarily prepared to receive these sudden influx politically, socially, or legislatively. So what followed was a very large delay on the part of the Greek state in terms of implementing any kind of comprehensive policy framework towards documenting and regularizing, you know, regularization. These are just like very political legislative terms, not very in favor of, but just to give a sense. So the first organized and like structured system for documenting these large influx of people, what came to be then termed as undocumented migrants, then that wasn't a thing, that wasn't a term. Movement was a lot unregularized then. Anyways, the first structured kind of legislative framework came about in Greece in around 1997. There was a presidential decree in 97, and the implementation started in 98. So I was born in 1991. So if you're thinking about the fact that up until then, there was no actual comprehensive framework, that's why that can help you in understanding of how we have a situation of, us being born and raised in the country and just it in a legislative hole. And also understanding why Greece was so unprepared to even consider the second generation when it was still reconciling with the first generation. It was still trying to deal with that influx. So as far as our okay, so then, we're here, we're, coming of age, because now by the time we come of age in the late, like 2009, for example, we are coming of age into a framework that has, documentation of people, but there's nothing for us. So our parents are now getting their paperwork together, but they still haven't even, the state hasn't even like thought about the, what about the kids? So we start organizing, we, get a foothold in figuring things out, understanding what legislation is, understanding what we need to, fight for. And, for us, the goal was Greek citizenship, period. And so after quite a few years of heavy organizing and across the board, like with various other groups, it wasn't just us in terms of the second generation. It was a lot of different kind of collaborations going on a political level, at least. And then in 2010, success, the first the law 3838, which was quite progressive for its time. The first and that law was passed under the socialist center-left government, PASOK, and it was the first reform of the Greek citizenship law, the legislation of who becomes a Greek citizen, and under this law, children of migrants could have access to Greek citizenship. They didn't just get it; there was a pathway. And I say that to make it understood that you still have to meet certain criteria. Not many people could still get it under this pathway.
So it's not like by birth, you're not being it's like if your parents would migrate to Greece, then it's not, and then you were born, it's not by birth you have the right, you have automatically the Greek citizenship. No, you still have to go through a whole, you're not full, like there's still, in terms of laws, you still have to go through a whole loop where you still have to apply. It's not essential part of who you are in a person, as like the government doesn't consider you Greek once you're born.
No. So under that law in 2010, because now there's a different law, because there's a whole situation in between. But under that law, both parents had to have been residing legally in the country for at least 5 consecutive years before your birth, or you had to have successfully completed 6 grades of Greek education. Under that law. Then what happened? Yay, success, we're happy, we get a law, some of us start applying, things are, it's going very slow, because just because a law is in existence doesn't mean it's being, enforced and implemented. So we're still grinding, we're still hustling, we're still trying to make sure that this law is being implemented. But 2 years later, because this is Greece, the right-wing government comes into power and says, F that, listen, no, none of y'all are Greek. And the first thing they do when they get into power is the law gets revoked. So certain, to be more, legislatively correct, certain key provisions of that law were deemed unconstitutional by the Council of State's decision 460 in 2013. So we're back to square one, back to but at least now we had a framework, we had a blueprint. We knew what we wanted and what we had to, we knew that, okay, we need this and this is how it needs to be done. So back to organizing, back to fighting. And then in 2015, under the Syriza party, the center-left government, the citizenship law was reinstated with law 4332, and that is the one that's still existing to this day. But it's far from over. As I said before, just because a law is in existence doesn't mean that it's being implemented, because what they do is they give you the easiest way to get away with not making your citizens just to not implement the law. Do you know what I mean? So there's a law in existence, but if it's not being implemented, we're still back to square one. Also, the law still has certain setbacks in terms of who has access. There's still very many people like myself, born and raised in Greece, who still, under this law, don't have access to Greek citizenship. So it's, you know, it's not over, but it's, yeah. So I said all of that to give you the history of why we got here and what all that organizing was about.
Yeah, I think.
And the group of us that were organizing, that led then into a more institutionalized form where an organization was founded. It still is doing the work to this day. So yeah, so that social movement and that group of organizing turned into an organization as well.
Can you remind us of the name of this organization?
Generation 2.0 Red.
Okay.
Rights, equality, and diversity.
Okay.
Yeah, so that organization basically was birthed out of this need for a more, yeah.
It was birthed out of the organizing.
Yeah.
Towards Greek citizenship, and now it has expanded into just basically focusing on the migrant family as a whole. So rights, equality, diversity, all that stuff, and does a whole host of really important work.
So as in terms of like what the situation is now, is there a difference between this new law that was reinstated in 2015 and the one, the 3838 law?
In 2009?
In 2009.
Yes. Yep, major differences. First of all, the other law had other provisions that were quite progressive for their time. For example, the other law had a provision that allowed immigrants to vote for the first time. And that was, so yeah, they were able to vote in council elections. That gave the right to vote for the first time to immigrants in the country. That was revoked, so we're back to square zero. Where immigrants still don't have the right to vote, no matter how many years, like only Greek citizens and European citizens for the European elections. And then in terms of this law, so it's a bit different in terms of the fact that, for example, in addition to a specific amount of years that your parents have to be legally residing, for underage, for the children, you also have to have entered first grade of primary school. And then for adults, it also has a specific amount of years that you have to have gone to a Greek school. So it's still the same thing, like in terms of Greek school, which is exclusionary because there are many people who, born and raised in Greece, should have every right to have access to Greek citizenship, but they didn't go to a Greek school. They went to an English school. They went to a French school. They don't have access. They would have to go through naturalization, which is a completely different process.
It just really sounds like it's a whole system being set in place, that was set in place to really make sure that you don't have access to Greek citizenship. And I'm really curious to kind of, I don't know, yeah, I'm really just curious to like listening to all of this, and then also listening to like the more recent work that you have been doing and like putting out, where it's about like Afro-Greeks. What does that mean, kind of? Like, what is the difference? What does that mean?
I've been thinking about this over the years. So I can tell you where it came out of, and I can tell you how I'm feeling towards it. But so it came out of the movement. It came out of the, second generation movement, and it came out of the, so first, sorry, I forgot to mention, this movement was spearheaded by Black people. Both in terms of, the movement was spearheaded by Black, because we're the most visible. Like we cannot blend in to the population. You know what I mean? It's a very different. I think it's not. Anyways, that's a whole different conversation about, when you think about movements and political organizing and why things are spearheaded by Black people. But anyways, yeah, so this movement was spearheaded by Black people. And I think the term came out of a need to situate ourselves and to describe our reality, which is African, Black, but also Greek. I can't necessarily, it just start, you know how these things just start? someone says it, other people say it. It's not, I can't even necessarily pinpoint it to a specific person. It's just something that started out of the movement. And I really believe that it was more so just I've been thinking a lot about, Gayatri Spivak, an amazing thinker, um, talks about strategic essentialism. And I've been thinking a lot about how this kind of goes in a little bit. Well, and the way I kind of interpret this, how it fits in, because she talks about, the practice of essentialism as a political tactic, um, where, you can employ certain identities, or ideas of an identity, in politically, like as a political strategy to meet an end. So you can also think about it. So think about that. Let's hold that. And then let's also hold thinking about certain performances of identity as a process in which those who are performing don't necessarily have a set meaning for. So, we didn't start out as a unified second generation collective. It wasn't a situation where we knew even what we were. It was a situation of people coming together and discussing the problem. What's the problem? The problem is we're undocumented. We don't have access to this. We don't have access to that. We can't travel. We can't leave. We can't be in here. We can't do anything. We can't work properly. Okay. And then what are we? Oh, we're second generation. So we organized into a collective. And I think that term came out, the need collectivized as that term came out of all of that. What does it mean?
But is it a self? So it's really like a self. It's really like a term that grew out of the community, and it's not something that was put, that you were labeled, or like it was something that it's like a how do you call it? Self-determinated thing.
Yeah, that's why I speak about strategic essentialism. Yeah, it was something that came out of the movement. It came out of the people. And not everybody agrees with it. Not everybody uses it. Not everybody feels that they are Afro-Greeks. Some people feel that they're just Greek. Some people feel that they're not Greek. Like it, yeah. But it came out of the movement. It came out of the people. It came out of a need to place ourselves and situate ourselves and speak to our reality, because our reality is, yeah, we're African, but we're not. I'm not just Kenyan and Nigerian. I'm Greek, and it is a fact. It is a reality. I am from Greece. I'm born and raised in Greece. And then when you say just Greek, that doesn't speak to your reality either, because I'm not the typical what you would think of as Greek, and neither do I want to be either. I'm also very proudly Black and visibly Black. So yeah,
it sounds like it kind of served a purpose then, in a sense, this term, because it kind of made this group that was working on these issues, like you said, there were so many issues that people were working on. It made these people who were working on these things a collective and kind of identifiable in a way.
yes.
And what I'm also curious to know is, because we've seen obviously the video where 9 young Greeks discuss the term "I can't breathe," right? And then what was interesting was also that there was a follow-up video where you were also hosting it, and you were talking about cultural identity. And this video, it actually included 3 Black people, but then also 3 white people of different cultural backgrounds, also not only Greek. And you started off this second video also saying that there was like some, maybe not backlash, but some criticism towards this term Afro-Greek. I think we would both be curious to know kind of the debate that is surrounding this name, how people relate to it, or how you relate to it now. Was there a difference in how you related to it before and then after, and what just the general debate is surrounding this topic?
Okay, so yeah, sure, I can speak a bit about what the debate that was going on then.
Mm-hmm.
The debate that is ongoing internally, like within ourselves, within our, the Greek others, and how I feel about what's the debate I'm having. Okay, so what we meant in that second video was that there were quite a lot of comments, and there was kind of like a debate around, oh, but why are they Afro-Greeks? Why aren't they just Greeks? You know, like, why are you, like, that is an exclusionary term in itself. And there are certain Black Greeks who feel that way too. Like, why make a point to, why can't we just be Greek? Why can't Greek be inclusive of everything? And why do you have to have Afro-Greek? Other people were like, oh, why are you trying to Americanize everything just because there's Afro-Americans? Why do you need Afro-Greek? Like, you know, so there's all kinds of comments because everybody's opinionated and they freely disperse their opinions, and which is good, but you know. Okay, so that was, I don't have anything else to say, much to say about it. We just commented on it because it was something that really came out in the comments and in the feedback that we were getting. And when I say we, I mean myself and my creative collaborative partner, Irene, who we did the videos together.
Yeah.
We curated, produced, and edited those videos. So yeah, we just felt a need to kind of just situate the term in a way and say what the term actually means. And also that doesn't mean that for everyone.
It doesn't mean that forever, you said?
For everyone?
Yeah,
Everyone.
as in that not everyone identifies as an Afro-Greek. And how do I feel about it? It's still under construction in my head. Like for me, and that's why I mentioned Spivak before. I understand, you know, the need for the term in the context of the movement, in the context of claiming, and in the context of situating yourself and positioning yourself in order to have the ability. And when I mean ability, I don't mean actual ability. I mean to have the like, you need to place yourself to then have the ammunition. That's such a loaded word. But to be able to then claim citizenship, you need to say, but this is who we are. And we are many, you know. So I understand the need for it then. I mean, I call myself Afro-Greek, but I call myself many things too. So, you know, like, I don't know. I'm still conflicted. I'm still under construction in my mind, in terms of what it means. And I understand, and I understand and support the necessity for it. It's necessary.
9 young Greeks discussing this term. I can't breathe. Yeah, I think this video can be seen like as a good example of kind of stressing this Afro-Greek reality, right? This Afro-Greek experience, because it stresses it, it highlights it, and both of us come from, again, different contexts, like all of us, but I think something that we maybe have in common is that we were socialized in Western Europe, right? And I think what we wanted to do also with this association is kind of strengthen like the networks of artists and cultural producers within Europe. And what we've thought about and what we've talked about is also this idea how kind of Europe is separated sometimes in like Western and Southern Europe. And a lot of times when we talk about anti-Black racism, or at least I can speak from my experience, when I hear conversations about anti-Black racism within Europe, it's often about this experience of Black people in Western Europe. So I feel like a lot of times there's almost a focus on this experience, and I don't really hear many stories about, this other experience of Southern Europe, like Black people in Southern Europe, European
and just
countries.
the struggle that Jackie was describing, huh?
Exactly, like the legislation and everything, you know, it seems so, like all this to say, basically, I think your video was a great example of stressing like this very real reality, right, in Greece. And what we are wondering is why is it so important for you to highlight and center this Afro-Greek experience? And also in the bigger context of archiving, like how does this video play into kind of archiving this experience, this reality? What does that mean to you? Why do you find it important to make a video, you know, because this video, it will live, it will be on the internet, like Afro-Greek children, you know, you also spoke about like the younger generation now, like the Gen Zs that are growing up now, like they can see that. And what does all of this mean to you?
And maybe
your
also,
work?
and maybe also adding to that, because at the beginning, I think you said that what you're doing, like before, you used to do more grassroots work, and now you're actually more, you know, documenting. You said that this is also, you know, why you started the podcast, and I think it kind of really connects to that.
Yeah, it does.
So also, like, how did it come about, and why was it important? And then maybe also like, what were the references? Because you spoke about, you know, that there was different waves, and because you didn't start from scratch, right? Like, because you said there was like the elders who had already been doing this work, but when it comes to documentation, was that where you really like one of the first people to document it the way that you do? Kind of like also adding like because you said that there was nothing really, you know, archived or documented. So who did you build on also? Maybe as like another layer. I think like that was
sorry to overwhelm you.
It's a huge question.
Okay, you know what the thing is, a lot of the times you're so busy doing the work that you don't, and also thinking in terms of resources, you don't always have the resources to actually also document what you're doing, you know, and in retrospect, think about what you did and make sure that that's out there, that there's a, you know, that there's that history is visibly documented in some way and archived. And I've been thinking a lot about that, like, you know, these, you know, the past since 2006, people have been going at it and doing this work of this very necessary political work. It's not, you know, the things that we did back then are not documented. They're not. It's all oral history. It's all what, you know, I mean, those of us who were there and doing it, we know what we were doing, but it's not, unfortunately not, because you don't, you know, you're so focused on doing the work sometimes, and also you don't always have the resources to do it, you know.
Yeah.
How this video came about. Wow. Actually what happened was the foundation, the ANAS Foundation, they contacted me because they were introduced to myself and my work through some other stuff I had done. I was a keynote for one of their like a conference festival kind of thing that they did. I did a keynote talk, and so this was all during the BLM uprising.
In 2020, 2020.
Yeah, so around the time of the murder of George Floyd, where everyone and their mama was like, "Oh, Black people." Exist.
Basically, when white people were, or like white institutions,
yes,
Black Lives Matter, and we all knew it started like
no,
way earlier, like years ago, but yeah.
When institutions, in that very concentrated summer of when institutions were like, the Onassis Foundation contacted me to, well, Stegi, which is their, I should get this right, sorry. I should actually get this right. Well, it's the cultural part. So they contacted me to, because they wanted to do something, as a lot of institutions wanted to do something at that time, but they didn't know what to do and how to do it. And so they contacted me and they said, we want to do something and we don't know what to do or how to do it, and we think it's important. Would you be interested? And I was like, well, okay. So, so myself and Irini were already around that time, and just kind of in that intense summer, we were already thinking about what we can do for ourselves to deal with what's going on, and to process what's going on and think about what we can do in Greece. So I thought we were thinking very small. We were like, let's get a couple of us on Zoom and let's talk to ourselves and, you know, process this shit together, because it's very, you know, it's not, it's violence. So it just so happened that at the same time that we were kind of thinking of doing something, and when I mean very, you know, I mean like between ourselves, like, hey, let's get a couple of us Black people and just have a conversation between ourselves around what we're seeing, what's going on, and what's also going on for us here. And then around that same time, the foundation contacted me because of the work that they knew I was doing, and because of they knew me, and so they contacted me, and so I just kind of merged those two things together. And we were very, very, very adamant, and we refused to do this if we didn't have full creative control, period. So what you saw, both of the conversations actually were curated, produced and edited by us. Like we just had the institutional resources to do it, which was great. It was a great collaboration in that they respected and adhered to our insistence on full creative control. So we even did the editing, you know, like this was work that went into that. We hosted it, we invited the people that we wanted to invite, and we had the conversation, and it was really done for us first and foremost, because we were already going to do it, you know, but now we got a way to do it on a bigger platform, which kind of does change the dynamics in terms of then you have to think about, you have an audience now, you know, it's different if we're talking amongst ourselves, but I think the amongst ourselves still kind of came through. Because I remember on that day after the conversation, we just kind of like all hugged each other, because it was really a conversation for us. And it was really the first time, and that I think was the magnitude of the fact, and that's why it kind of, you know, it had the impact that it had and went viral in that way, across different, because it's not just a YouTube, it was across different, like other platforms, we posted it on their platforms. It kind of, the day I understood that, wow, shit, people have seen this, is when I was in Kipseli, so Kipseli, the hood, it's not really the hood, but we call it that, because Kipseli used to, because there's a different conversation, but it used to have the largest concentration of migrants. So it was where the Blackness lie, but that's changing because of gentrification. But anyways, I went to get ice cream and someone was like, hey, I saw you on YouTube. I was like, oh Jesus, this thing has really gone around. That was when I realized
that was like a YouTube sensation.
I was minding my business, just getting some ice cream, and someone was like, aren't you and I was wearing a mask. So the fact that they even I've seen you somewhere, and I was like, around the neighborhood? No, you were in that. Okay, I was like, oh damn. Okay, anyways, it was the first time I think that so many of us, like a group of 9 Black people speaking Greek, was on people's screens. Like people had never seen that many of us in that kind of concentrated situation ever, like ever. You know, there's the isolated actors who do, you know, it's not like, but we had never actually come together in that way, in such in your face, discussing what we were discussing in like Greek. So that, I think visually, that was pretty impressive.
It really spread like throughout Europe. Like that's the impression. Like you saw it like anywhere, like yeah. And it was people from throughout Europe who sent it. Like I remember like receiving it from several people who were like, one person was in Germany, the other was in Spain. They're like, oh, have you seen this? You know, it was like, oh, it really.
Yeah, it got outside of the Greek context.
Yeah, it
also.
really was. Even though it was like there were only subtitles, you know, like even though there were only subtitles and English subtitles, and it wasn't even spoken English, like the English language wasn't spoken.
Yeah.
Because it's the first time that we came forward in that way and situated ourselves in that way and had that discussion. Do you know what I mean? When there's nothing, the first things usually kind of, you know, obviously people have been speaking on the experience of being Black in Greece. Different people have been doing the work, but it was the first time that a collective of us came together and like kind of like put ourselves out there like that in that way and had that conversation. And it was a conversation between ourselves. Like we were brutally honest about different things, and you could tell it was an internal conversation that was then broadcasted. But it was done first and foremost between us. Like you can I think it comes across in the terms of what we were discussing and the way we discuss things. It wasn't for a wide or other audience. It was literally for ourselves. But then we had to be very mindful in the editing, and we're very because there are certain parts of the conversation. Like you all saw a 45-minute conversation of what was actually a 1.5 hour, almost 2 hour. I think it was like we had 2 hours of material because we were literally just taught. It was intense. We were just like we kind of were given that space to talk to actually, because we don't even always gather, regardless of this specific video. We don't always gather. I think the last real gatherings that intense gatherings was during the whole second generation organizing for citizenship. Since then, there haven't really been a time when we've come together in that way.
So it had been years, basically. So it had been several years.
Yeah, I mean, gather to talk in that sense, not like gather as in, a group of us goes to a club or something, or goes, to eat or something. I mean, like gather intentionally.
Organized talk, basically like an organized talk.
Exactly. And that was a form of organizing, actually. Yeah, so that's how that came about, and that's what we insisted on, and we were granted that. They understood what was at stake. What else? Sorry. What was the other part of the question? Why?
Yeah. So how this video plays into the archiving also of this experience. And we're also mindful about that, like while producing this video. And then Marnie, you also had a follow-up question, right?
No, I think it was already.
Yeah, okay.
But in conversation with that is also like the fact that I'll be curious, like if you can also speak about having produced this video and having been hosted in this institution, like what that also meant, and like speaking within a non-Black led institution, like do you feel like that did, because you said like, okay, it was a conversation for you, by you, but then sometimes when you do speak in a certain space and kind of the power, the institutional power that the space holds, it can impact like the way you do speak. Do you feel like this also impacted it, or was it just, did you really feel like free just being there?
And that's why we insisted on having full creative control.
Okay.
Because there are certain parts of both conversations, both videos, that we made the decision, so myself and Irene, to not publicize, because it's not for that lens. We focused on making sure that the space that we created in that moment was as open and as safe as it could be for our collaborators, our participants. So that they had the comfortability to voice what they wanted to voice. And then we also made sure that they let us know what they were comfortable with being broadcasted and not. So there are certain parts that didn't make it to the cut because we agreed that they shouldn't. And the institution was thankfully very understanding in that, and they let us have full creative control. Like there wasn't any, there were questions at points, oh, why didn't you keep that? And but we had full, that was the importance of that. And the part about archiving and documenting, it's such a collaborative process. Like I cannot stress this enough of how collaboration is key. We were very intentional on gathering us and on opening up this space that we were given to others for us to come together. And because you cannot do the work alone, period. We have to do the work together. This isn't work that you can do alone. And it's not work that you should do alone. Let's start there. So we just facilitated the conversation, and I feel as if the visual material is so important. It's easy, it's accessible, and it's just not there. And when you think about the histories and the lived experience of Black people in Greece, there's not that much material there other than the organizing stuff of, like, Generation 2.0, that is very intentional about writing stuff, putting things out there. Now the stuff I did with Irini, the videos, the podcast. It's about, now that we've put in the years, given our youth to to getting these laws passed so that we can live, so that we can breathe in some semblance of humanity. We can focus now on other aspects, such as this, such as documenting, such as visual materials, such as other parts. Because before, when you're in survival mode, when you don't have papers, it's your own survival mode. You have to focus on getting that. You can't focus on any other thing. You can't focus on the social reality, on the comforts, on the this, on the that, on what it actually is to be socially in this country. And now that we have made those strides in terms of getting some kind of legislation in place that can provide a security kind of situation where you're no longer on survival mode of trying to make sure that you can have access to certain things. Now we can focus on the other stuff. And that's why all this stuff is, I think, and I feel, I'm saying all this just to say that I feel as if that's why now is when you're starting to see this material come out, because now we can, because first of all, when I say we, I don't, like, it's not that many of us who are doing this work, and that's the sad thing. We're not, it's very, when I say, we passed the law, it's not a vague, generalized somebody. It's specific people. It's like this person, this, like, people we know. It's like 5 of us, it's not like and we're tired and we're older and we can do, and we want to do other things. So yeah, I think now is why we're seeing more of that push towards that direction of documenting in other ways, I think, because we can finally have the space to do that. Because before we were, freaking like hustling and grinding to get laws passed, but but I agree. And it is important. It's important to leave that out there. It's important because it leads you to things like this, the fact that we're in conversation today, and I can find out about your situations. I think that's so important in finding out, in networking and understanding what's going, because you're never in a vacuum, and some can feel like that, but you're not, like in the earlier days of the organizing around citizenship, we collaborated a lot with, and like networked a lot with Italy because they're in a similar position, so it's important of creating those roots and those networks and kind of coming together and getting the work done, I think. And documenting it all in some way, because others need, I was talking about this with, who was I talking about? We're always talking about things. Who, I think, was it Irini? Anyways, about how, like, the younger generations, they're gonna, like, their kids now being, that are, gonna come of age as Greek citizens, because they got it when they were kids. They're gonna have a completely different experience, and we're glad for that. But they need to know how they got there, They need to know, because it's so easy, generation to generation, to erase and forget. And we mustn't forget. We mustn't forget, because that's why we keep doing the same shit over and over again. That's why we're always back to square one, because we forget. Pardon my language. I'm like holding it, like, usually I swear a lot more, so sorry. I'm trying to not swear.
It's okay, yeah, I think we do too. Sometimes we have to keep each other in check.
Yeah. No one's like, hey, where's my mother? Hey. Yeah, because, but this stuff has been done before, okay? And we mustn't forget that, because we need to learn from how it's been done before. Because if we don't document these things, if we don't say how we got here, they will say that we never existed or it never happened. You know what I mean? And you know, there's like 15 and 16-year-olds who are Greek citizens today, and that's great, but they don't know, and they won't know how that came about. And so that, and just making sure that that's there so that people know, and so that we don't make it, so that it's not just about making the same mistakes, but it's also about repeating the same thing. That, and not we repeating, them repeat, like, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know, perhaps like knowing this kind of history, because from what I hear, from what I understand, is that obviously there is everyday racism that Black people experience in Greece. And this legislative struggle and like this fighting, you know, that is something that also kind of leaves an imprint, and or like the fact that you didn't have access to citizenship for such a long time, and that you had to fight in recent years, you know, for these rights. That also tells you a lot about where Greek society, or like perhaps also like the anti-Blackness that's ingrained in Greek society, and where Greek society stands in, or like the non-Black part of Greek society. And so I could imagine that knowing about this history can also explain some of these experiences that these young people are obviously facing on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah, it's anti-Blackness and just generalized anti-otherness, you know. And exactly, because we had to fight for securing legislation, now we can focus on fighting for social stuff. So like what you mentioned, every day, there's everyday anti-Blackness, everyday racism, all kinds of stuff that we are going through that we weren't able to address. And that's why you can see that it's being addressed now, because we're no longer like in survival mode. We're still in survival mode, but just in a different way. Now we can focus on attitudes and perceptions and, you know, all that stuff. But before, we had to still focus on that, but just focus on getting citizenship so that we can, you know, be. And then now, and that's why I think that's why a lot of that material is coming out now as well. I know from my perspective, I'm focusing more on that now because I can, you know.
Yeah. And so you also mentioned this idea of like history not repeating itself, right? And like they have to know, you keep saying that, like the younger generation, they have to know. And it makes me think of like how knowledge is passed down, right? Or if it's passed down even. And I'm wondering, like, how do you look to this? Like, do you see your work now that you're doing, the documentation of these experiences, the archiving, the so-called archiving of these experiences? Do you see this like as a part of passing this knowledge down to the younger generation, like as a necessary step to take?
Yes, but I don't do it with that in mind.
Okay.
I didn't do it with that intention. I did it because you just have to do what you want to see done. You know what I mean? It's exactly what you are doing. You just have to do what you want to see done. I don't see a space where we're not, I don't want to say this word because this word is also getting on my nerves nowadays, visibility. So many words are getting on my nerves. Anyways, I don't see Black people on my screen. Black people that come from the same background that I come from. So Black people in Greece speaking and having the space to speak. So we just had to get it done. You know what I mean? I didn't do it with the intention of leaving something for the younger generations, but I'm glad that it's doing that. And I guess a part of doing this kind of work is that. But actually, we just wanted to talk, and we were like, you know, we want to talk to ourselves, and an opportunity came about that allowed us to do it in a more, that gave us the resources to do it, where it would have a wider audience, and so we did it. But we would have done it on Zoom by ourselves as we originally. Like, that's what it started. That's what the original thing was. We just want to get together and talk. There's something else I want to say. Yes. And the necessity of doing this, and the second conversation as well, is also because we cannot be continuously burdened with the fact, with having to do this kind of, you know what I mean? Like the fact, okay, we spoke on this topic, anti-Blackness and, racism and all that stuff, because that was the specific topic of the conversation. But the importance of the fact that it was in Greek, it was people, and if I don't know if you paid attention at all to like the little what are those called? Anyways, we were very purpose and intentional in making sure that there was a wide variety of professions being represented, just so that people are aware that there's a Black doctor, there's a Black, you know what I mean? So that we can do other things, It's important that we can start doing other things. Even in the second conversation that was on cultural identity, again, a wide variety, to make sure that we can, so someone knows that there's someone doing media, there's someone, because we can't be, we're continuously, the only time that we're called upon to speak is just so that we can speak about racism. It's like, no, we can speak about other things. Okay, right now we spoke about racism because that was the entry, that was the platform we were given at that point. But because there was a doctor, there was an actor, there was a singer, there was an athlete, there was Irini does finances, there was all, now someone, will know. And next time, hopefully in the future, when someone is freaking talking about the weather, and you'll have like a meteorologist speaking, and not, only being called upon to speak when it's about racism and how can we fix it, because it's not, we're not the ones who need to fix it.
True.
But I mean, in that point, because it was in that summer, that was what we would be, that was the entryway, and we spoke about that because we wanted to speak about that. But hopefully in the future, we'll only be speaking about that.
Okay.
But it's so exhausting.
Because you were mentioning just about like what you said, it's kind of connecting two things that you said before we even started recording, where you said like, oh, you can see that right now within Europe, there's like kind of a movement of like Black artists or like Black culture producers and creatives that is kind of forming. And then you also spoke just a few minutes ago about how you also had a lot of contact with Black people in Italy who were in a similar situation. So I think I would be kind of just curious, again, like also because of our work, how do you network? And I mean, you both met through NPAD, so through the European Network for People of African Descent.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, how do you network, and like, what is the importance also for you and your work and the people that you work with, the community that you work with, to stay in touch with other Black people throughout Europe, and like to have this exchange?
Yeah, very important, because you need to know that we need to do this work together, and we all have so much, we're all kind of struggling with the same thing. Okay, so I think it's key. And how is it done? First of all, by putting the work out there. That's, when you put the work out there, the people you need to connect with usually find it. And that's like, same thing with these videos, same thing with the work that we do with Generation 2.0 and the organizing. By doing the work, you connect with the people. But then also there are also other ways, more typical things of, conferences, talks, network meetings, joining networks, joining groups, and just being part of collectives. And slowly you start building a little hub of like-minded people doing the same work. And that's kind of how it gets out. But it starts first and foremost with putting the work out there. I think that's the key thing. So Generation, for example, 2.0, but even before it became Generation 2, when we were still just a second generation, just a group of us doing work, it was about meeting people here and there, talking to this person, talking to that person, doing this, going out there and putting the work out there, and then you find the people, I don't remember right now exactly how the activists in Italy, how we got in contact with them. I don't remember. I don't know how that happened, but I think it's safe to say it was by the fact that we put the work out there. yeah, and in any, in any context, whether it was legislation, like policy work, to like, cultural work, I think it's key to um, see what is going on outside your door, like outside your door, outside your country, like see what other people are doing, how are other people doing it, finding out about different contexts, because it helps you understand your context. Everything is interconnected anyways. So yeah, so that's why I'm super excited and about what the work that you both are doing. So I'm like, ooh, nice.
I think like what you said really resonated with me when you said, okay, that this like
When you put the work out.
yeah, when you put the work out, but also yeah, when you put the work out, you see what other people are doing. Because I think when I first saw your work, I was just what you said even earlier, again, like off camera, about that there's a very strong, a lot of things, when it's a lot of conversations happening around Blackness that come from the US, and there is like, in a way, like this hegemony, a lot of the things that like I have read, that we also talk about, it just is very much inspired from the US.
Yeah.
And I think it's so like this need, like to also like connect with other Black people within Europe. And then when you said like, yeah, the people who need to find you, they will find you. And this is literally what happened. Also like how we got, because we were just really interested, like, okay, what is happening in other places within Europe. So I think that is just really resonating.
Finding out about the whole Afro-German movement was very inspiring to me and empowering to me. And I'm actually looking for the book that was written by the collective, like Maya Ayim and a lot of other people. They wrote a book about what it means to be Black in Germany. And I'm thinking like they did all that in the 80s or something?
Correct, yeah, it was in the 80s.
Like, wow, do you know what I mean? Like this is literally, Greece is like now at the state that they were in then, So that's what I mean by I said that, the work has already been done in so many ways by different people. And it's important to connect to that and know and learn. Because as you said, Marnie, there is a hegemonic kind of thing on discourse on Blackness. It's just American, and not all the stuff works for us. We can learn.
Yeah,
there's a lot to learn, but it's an entirely different discourse over here. And so it's important to and it's sometimes it's so frustrating, because it's like you don't want to always be the one having to think about it. Like I want to, like for example, I'm reading a lot of Sylvia Wynter and Hortense Spillers right now, like really amazing, like mind-blowing Black women thinkers. And it's just like thinking about how, okay, but then how does that, because it does apply, everything applies to everywhere. It's just figuring out how. And also when there's not, the discourse or the language or the vocabulary, it's sometimes hard. But once it clicks, you realize that it's all universal in some way. But it's just about making sure, and that's also about why we do the work we do, like, so that we can make sure that those who need to do the other work can do it, So like now we have citizenship. That means that now the next, thinkers and scientists and whatever that are going to come out of Greece can do that, can have the space of that, because they don't have to worry about other things, So it's also about the work that we do does also build a path for the future generations of people who will be able to do the other work that needs to be done too. We need, social theorists and thinkers who are going to place a lot of this discourse in the European context, because it hasn't really been done. I know that there's a nice, interesting thing happening in Italy now. A lot of writing coming out of like the Black Italian and just the Mediterranean as a social site for Blackness, and that's been super interesting to see.
You recently started your a podcast where you interview like local Black perspectives, and yeah, my question is, can you maybe share what your intention was with this podcast and your motivations of starting this podcast.
Yeah, so podcast, it's my baby, but it's on pause right now because I'm in New York, you know, and life, and but anyways, the podcast. Yeah, I do things that are basically pure on my interest. So I'm really interested in tracing the Black man as a contemporary and living, emerging, and emerged culture. I'm interested in looking at Black diasporic cultural formations, and I'm really interested in looking at the Mediterranean as a site for that. So I like to talk to people. So aside, it's a form of research, and I just, what you do, what if you want to learn about what's happening, talk to people, and also in understanding that. So that was just my pure thing, is I just want to talk to people about what it means to be Black in Greece, period. And because that is the work, that is important, that is, someone will hear that and then decide to start researching and write a paper, these white people, but anyways. That's how research starts. You talk to people and pull out information, and B, also having an understanding of the broader importance of actually documenting our stories, and our, what people are doing and where they're coming from and what's going on. And it's not necessarily because, I was a bit like, when I was initially thinking about the podcast and what I wanted to do, and I was like, I want to talk to people, sometimes you feel a sort of a pressure, like, okay, what are we going to talk about? And you know what, sometimes everyday life is important. Let's just talk about the fact that we're sitting here in this square, and sometimes that's also important. So I just kind of let it, I let it free flow. I let it, I also, I host, I curate, and I produce that too. So I do the editing. I learned how to, it's interesting. I learned how to edit
Nice.
on a very basic program, or that, what's it called, Audacity, or what is it?
Oh yeah,
Good.
Oh my days, like the amount, the work that we do, Jesus. But
no, but honestly, and always self-taught, and it's always a struggle. It's like,
always,
not work
always,
out.
you can't,
Yeah.
you know what? And I don't know if it's a control thing, but you can't let them do that. You can't let them edit your shit. Like, that's not gonna work. No, you can, like, I'm not gonna do it if I cannot, I'm not gonna do it if I cannot do the editing, only because we know what happens when you let them edit shit. Like, this is just protection,
A friend of mine, I don't know who said that, but he told me editing is the most important thing. Never let editing, like, always do the editing yourself, always. Because otherwise, that's the narrative you create, right? You can create a narrative by editing. You can chop things away, and yeah.
And it's not coming from a place of you feeling like you know what's right or what's wrong. It's just coming from a place of you being okay with putting that out there. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if what I'm doing is right or wrong. I just know that I can walk away and feel that whatever I put out there was in service to myself and the person as well. Because I care, after any talk and things like that, I ask, we have a conversation. Is there anything that you don't want in there? Like, it's a collaborative thing. It's not just about me putting this other person you're speaking to is putting themselves out there too, and they need to be comfortable with what they want to talk about, what they talked about, and things don't always make it,
Yep.
So, yeah, so just out of a pure kind of, I just kind of like, got on a pure interest in talking to people about and not to people, my friends.
That's amazing.
Like, gather around, all of you, let's talk. No.
But it makes so much sense, because like, who else are you gonna start with? Like, that's also what we do. Like, we do this for ourselves. Like,
and also knowing that is important. That what we say is important. It's not, we don't have to talk to some, like what, X that does X. That's important. And that is discourse. That is All this stuff that we read about, that we study, it starts from this. It starts from the everyday, simple. So that's how the podcast started, and it's in English, and that was a bit of a contested thing as well. I've got quite a lot of questions about why is it in English, and it's in English for two reasons, as opposed to being in Greek, since you're documenting. It's in English for two reasons. One, just pure because the radio station is in English, although that changed. When I got on board, it was because it's an international radio station. It doesn't just have a Greek audience. So when I got on board, it was most the shows were going to be in English, although that's now changing and they've started introducing other languages. So it's about also having it accessible to other audiences, because I think that's necessary. But also B, you know what? The reality is that we are multilingual people, okay? Period. You know, we speak over, you know, and that's okay. And if I want to do it, you know, if I want to do a show in English, I will do a show in English. If somebody wants to do it in Greek, they can do it in Greek. You know what I mean? Like, no, I'm just saying it because I got that question actually from Greek people. Like, hey, why is it, you know, this is important, what you're doing, but it needs to be in Greek. I'm like, yo, I did 2 talks on YouTube in Greek. Like, leave me alone. You know, like, I want this podcast, it can be in English. I'm also sometimes more comfortable in English, you know, and because it speaks to my experience of being, having English as a, you know, mother tongue, but it's also necessary to have things in Greek, you know, like, for example, the YouTube conversations needed to be in Greek, that could not be in English. So I think a variety is necessary. I think a variety is necessary. And yeah, I don't know, but it's on hold now. I feel so conflicted about my little baby because it's I call him a little baby because I literally like sleep with my laptop. Like, it's like I'm editing and I'm like, it's like just work that we put. It's like people don't understand the amount of work. It's not just you're hosting, which means that you're curating, which means that you're coming up with the concept, right? Thinking of this, the people you want to invite. This thing, you know, the work that you all do. You know, you're hosting, meaning you're hosting in the moment. You're producing, meaning that you are, you know, scouting location, contacting the people, doing this, doing that. And then you're editing, meaning you're sitting there at night, you know, like trying to understand how to use a program that you've never used because you don't know what edit. You're not a sound engineer, you know? You know, so like it is my baby.
Your baby.
Videos are my babies because it's like, yo, you know, I mean, with the YouTube, obviously we had the resources of the institution. So when I say we did the editing, I don't mean that I sat in front of the computer, but I mean that we have the raw material and, you know, sat there with time stamps and said, you know, and created a second script of what we want in and how we want it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but with the radio, I don't have those resources. I have to do the editing myself. I have to learn Audacity and start piecing, you know, I have to learn how to insert a song, learn how to fade the song out, like Jesus. But yeah, it's on hold until I figure out how I want to move forward with it, because I actually still have 2 more shows that I did before I left, but you know, I'm in NYU and NYU life does not leave room for anything else. And I'm working as well, you know, the hustle, the daily hustle. So I haven't had time to go back to it, but I hope to. And I mean, who knows? Or maybe it's just going to be what it is. You know, the 5 episodes I've done and those are enough and we move on to something else in life. I don't know. We'll see.
But it's so inspiring because, like, obviously, like you can tell it's a different production, the podcast than the YouTube video. Thank you. But I think it was so inspiring. Like when I listened to this first episode with, I think, Grace, her name was?
Yeah.
It was so inspiring, honestly, because like, I don't know, you could just tell like, yeah, Jackie, she just wants to do this. Yeah. Like you just wanted to speak to your friend. You just wanted to make a podcast out of it and you just did it. Yeah. You know? She made it happen.
Yeah, in a cafe in our neighborhood.
Yeah. And that spirit really comes through in the audio. And I think that's what's so inspiring. Yeah, to just see you literally putting out the work that you want to see. You're just like, this just has to get done.
Yeah. And it makes sense then also hearing you say now that you were struggling, you sleep with your laptop, you know, like trying to find out how this program works. I think it's very, very relatable. And,
that we all do.
Yeah, because if you want to get it done, you have to get it done. Like there's no resources to get a person to edit for you or help you try to, you know, you have to just figure it out for yourself. But the end result is beautiful, you know?
Yeah.
Even if it stays like this or you continue to upload on it, like it lives, it's there for people to hear, for people to experience. And that was the purpose. And that's beautiful.
But also the community that comes together in these kind of things, you know, for example, like with the, you know, I had to reach out, who do I know that knows how to do this show? What program do I, how do I use this? You know, like that comes together to help you do the work, you know?
I think we just really know what it's like.
We just you know, because that's what you're doing now.
Yeah. You always have these people on speed dial. You're like, oh, can you help me out with this?
Yeah, like help, and they're there for you because they know what it means.
And they come, every time.
Yeah, because they know what they mean to you, what it could mean to the community. Yeah, definitely.
Every single time they have come through. You know, one of my best friends was like, I'm gonna do the visuals. So I started. Well, I mean, we only did it for one so far, so the others haven't gotten up to date. But then, you know, it's the three that comes through, and it's like, no, you need to have like a look. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, okay, get me a look. And so she did like I think for the fifth one, you can see that she actually created like a thing for me. Like
some branding,
right?
Yeah. Branding was
silent. Put it out there and hope for the best. So a lot of the imagery was just we just after the talk we just take a selfie together, and that's the image of the show.
But it can't be like this, because if you like, I see this with Fayo all the time, right? I'm just like, this can just be, and Fayo's like, no, mommy, no. And then she goes and she's like, you know, like there's just some people who just have a vision.
Right, I'm so bad with that. I'm so bad with branding, you know, like I do so many things. And then people are like, why don't you post? Why don't you? I'm just like, I'm just trying to like get through the day sometimes. I ain't got time to like, you know, but yeah, it's important. It's important to post, to have all that in mind, you know, but I'm not that kind of person that will have that in mind. I'm focused on doing the work in that moment. And I'm not going to think about, okay, but sometimes, you know, there was one show I forgot to take a picture. And I had to call this person and take a picture on a different day because I forgot to take a picture. You know, like it's just like I forget these things. You know,
there's the picture now.
That's so funny.
But it's so beautiful because that's really then again like how it really becomes also a collaborative process and project. How you can involve all the creative.
The fact that I was able to get other people on that radio show as well. Like now others have shows. Like I'm really. There's no point in, for me, there's no, I see, collaboration is key. And if I get in that door, I want everyone to get in that door, you know, it's not, I don't like walking into a room and seeing just me. I get that shit pisses me off. Like I need other people there. So like, you know, with the show, I started the podcast and now I've been able to connect the people who have the radio with others that I know that are, you know, can do things like this, and they have shows now. So it's like, you know, we have to always, if we get through a door, then we need to make sure that door is wide open for the others, you know. So same thing with the YouTube talks, you know, we did those talks and now the others have been able to do other things from those talks. Like just need to make sure that, you know, and I swear I spend half my time like connecting people to people so that people can do other things, because I'm like, I don't want to be doing all these things all the time. I do what I like, but then, you know, organizing burnout is so real, you know. Because the thing is, when I mentioned before in the beginning about how like when I say we, it's actually very specific people. It's not like a general like collective. It's like A, B, and C, and it's like, and because when you put yourself out there and you are visibly doing certain things, and people have you in mind, whenever something has to be talked about, they'll call you. And it's like, no, there's others too. So no, I'm not gonna do this because I want her, this person, and like connecting people in that way, because like I'm not the one who has something to say. So many people have some things to say and they should say them. And so learning how to also delegate, and and have other people come in and do the work too, and you might not always agree with how they do it. That's also an interesting thing to think about, or what they're saying, but just making sure that there's other voices out there. Irene and I, so my collaborator, part of who we did the talks together. Like now we're like doing a lot of stuff together, and that in itself has taught me so much about partnership and like delegation, and like doing the work with someone else as well.
It's just good to have a to have a like a partner and like just a companion, huh? Where you don't have to feel the feeling like you're constantly by yourself. It's good to have someone to talk to within this process. Yeah, I think.
And who challenges you as well. Like Irene and I don't always see eye to eye.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It
I'm
is.
proud of that.
And to call each other out also, like when things are like, oh, what is this now? But also but at the same time also to hype you up, because I'm sure it wasn't always easy for you also, like doing the work that you do.
Yeah.
There must have also been like moments just of self-doubt, maybe like of.
Oh, constantly. You never know if you're doing it. You met like constantly. Like, did I say that right? Did I do that right? Am I like all the freaking time? Because,
Oh, thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank you so. This made my day.